I get the old saying of, a calm sea never made for a skilled sailor, and I get that, but we are holding the space for these kids. It's the greatest privilege, isn't it? To be able to just, sit with it, to be someone along the journey, at this such a formative time. So that's been a big part.
You were just listening to today's guest, Dr. Ray Swann. Ray's got a lot going on, from running an all-boys grammar school in Melbourne, Australia, to directing a research center aimed at helping teachers and learners, to running his own nonprofit organization, the Foundation for Positive Masculinity. We're so thankful for Ray taking time to meet with us. This is our second time talking with Ray about education in schools. After we share our masks, you're going to learn the following. 1, fun and easy things to do outside of school that will bring out the best in yourself as an educator. 2, how everything in your school and classroom begins and ends with this 5-letter word. It starts with a T, by the way. And 3, the last thing we want you to consider is a big deep. What is the soul of teaching? And what is happening in our schools today that's causing teachers to lose their soul for their craft? We're talking to teachers. Take out your notebooks and let's start the show. As a male educator at your school site, it can get lonely. Only 23% of K-12 educators in America are male. And just think about what this gender gap means for your male students. They experience disproportionate levels of discipline. This is a show for male educators who want to feel more understood by their community and want to create emotionally safe classrooms and schools for the next generation of male students. Welcome to Unmasking Male Educators. Ray Swann, I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you, Ishan. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Well, in our first conversation, we talked about our masks mostly. And as we have now been talking to educators and really talking to folks who are doing work on all sides of education, higher education, K-12, maybe even pre-K work, we would love to just have you reintroduce yourself again as in your educator roles but anything about yourself that you want people to know. But definitely as we jump into what's happening in education, we would love to hear from you about where you stand in that category.
For sure. So my name's Ray. I do a few things. I still work in a school and I'm like an administrator in a school. I have a role at a university where I do research into young men's mental health and boys and health-related stuff and education. And I'm a director of a foundation for positive masculinity. And in that role, we support schools in Australia and also a couple of schools in the United States now in doing work with kids, particularly around, curriculum provision and, other SEL kind of programs, doing working in circles and other bits and pieces as well. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And a bit later this year, we've got a conference which we're really excited about as well. So I thought I'd get that in nice and early.
Yeah, well,
this goes out, but so looking forward to that. That I guess increasing understanding of working with people not only in Australia but in other parts of the world.
And the conference is going to be in Los Angeles area, right? Because I want to make sure. Yeah, so we should definitely make sure we link the information to folks who are able to attend so they can check it out. I'm hoping somebody from our team will at least be there. I think the last time I checked, I may be out, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you get to be up here. I say up here. Yeah, that's right. That's the right directional.
It's northeast.
Northeast.
Northeast. That way.
There we go. Are you near the water? Are you near the water?
Yeah. I'm near the water. Yeah, I swam this morning actually. Yeah, I was in the bay down here in Melbourne. It's a bit like San Francisco Bay down here. So nice and cold, but it was good. Yeah, there's a few people down there. Crazy people just jumping in the water in the darkness and swimming around. It was great. It was really good.
Is that a morning practice or is that just today was for fun?
It's a morning practice. Yeah, I've been doing it probably for about 7 or 8 years now. I've got a friend and we head down and. We just swim. It's like it's an incredible thing to do. It's very I figure that like we all have like a dimension of our being that is a little bit crazy. So I figure give it a little airing, once or twice or three times a week. Maybe make a little deal with it, and then you do your crazy thing, and maybe it doesn't show up in other parts of your life.
Are you wearing wetsuit in that cold water?
No. It's just we call them bathers. I don't know what you call them. Swimming trunks or whatever. Yeah. It's mental, but it's good.
Oh,
You feel alive.
now that water. Now, just tell me, just to help us, for our geographically challenged folks, what body of water is that? It's a bay, but what ocean is nearest that bay?
Yeah, so it's nearest the Southern Ocean. So if you came across from your west coast and just kept going across and across and across, you'd eventually hit New Zealand,
Yeah.
and then down south with the Great Southern Ocean, and then heading in, there's the it's called Port Phillip Bay, but in First Nations it's called Nam is the name of it.
Damn, fantastic. Well, I'm so excited. I love the ocean. I'm not really into cold, but maybe one day I may have to come and watch you do that swim. While I'm not claiming. I'm
Hold
not
the
claiming.
towel.
I'm not claiming anything extra than watching. But maybe I'll stick my feet in. Well, I'm so excited that we now get to dig in deeper in these topics. First of all, thanks for sharing that, because I've been looking forward to getting back to Australia soon. So it's on the
Can't wait
list.
to have you. Yeah.
It's on the list for sure. As we've been like growing this movement, but also talking to educators, what I would love to just know from you is we're going to share out some of these educator masks, right? So just we'll do that quickly, and then I would love to just hear from you, like what things that are like standing out to you that are maybe even I won't use the word plaguing you, that are challenging you about education, that are like really interesting to you, but that also that are like taking up a lot of your energy and time, and maybe for passion purposes, or maybe just because it can't be ignored anymore, right? So we'll love to get into that. But for the mask, this season we're gonna be doing the mask where we'll share front and back. So do you want me to share mine first, or do you want to share yours first? How do you want to do it?
I think last time I jumped in, so as a courtesy, maybe this time you jump in. We can switch around.
Fantastic. Well, I've been working on this new design for the mask. So this is my mask. I can't figure out. I think these are the eyes. Still figuring out the orientation, but that's the mask. And as a teacher, when I was a teacher, I taught for 10 years at middle school, high school, both levels. I taught in public schools, a private school, and charter schools. So I've had experience in a lot of levels, but this is the mask that I would think was pretty characteristic of what was happening on the outside. Strict, caring, and loud. I think in most of my teacher reports, my teacher reviews at the end of the year, they say he's always yelling. But I don't even be yelling. I just have a loud voice. And so most times I'm having to whisper so people don't think I'm yelling, but that was what was happening on the front. Strict, caring, and loud. And I think when I think about the only one I'll speak about is the strict part, but is that it was more, it wasn't for strict for the sake of just being strict. It was like, I wanted students to have not only the best learning experience possible, but trying to create the best learning environment possible. And so sometimes that meant students who were taking away from that environment. I felt like I had to say something. Like some things you kind of let go. You're like, okay, I'm gonna let that go. 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 You're always like judging what things can be let go and what not. And I would say, but anything that felt was going to impede even one person learning, even at their table or in their group or on that side of the room, I felt like maybe sometimes even too much, but I felt like it was my responsibility to call it to the front, bring it. Hey, even whispering to the person, hey, I need you to knock that off. Or if I'm on the other side of the room, I may not be able to whisper. So I need to be like, hey, you cut that out, and so I think that maybe that's sometimes where the loud maybe have come in, but that was the front. It's like trying to like create an environment where learning can happen. And definitely when I got back from India, I did a Fulbright in India, and I was just so in awe of learning being what students were like excited about. I don't say it was learning. It was exciting. Like it was a passion for what it felt like and what it meant to know your stuff, to be smart. Being smart was not hidden. They didn't hide like the person with the highest score on a test is called the class topper. They literally go around looking at each other's papers to see who got the highest score so they can call out the topper. It was a thing I had never seen in education in the US. And so when I got back home, when I got back to the US, I was like, how do we make learning exciting where kids are like, I got the highest score on the test and they're not shamed about it. They're not treated like there's something wrong with them or that they're bad people for being proud of themselves. So that's what I brought out when I came back from India, I remember. And I think the things that are on the back that were pretty clear for me was the fear of being unliked, the desire to be effective, and so tired. And only one I'll talk about right now, I guess it'll be just I'll say the fear of being unliked with the desire to be effective. I felt like my first year teacher, I was like ready to be a teacher. I was going to be the nice teacher, like this one teacher I remember in middle school. Everyone loved that teacher. And I started trying to be like that guy where you got to eat in his class, you got to do whatever you want, you got to hang out with your friends. And I realized there's no respect here. Like the students, wait a minute. Is that what's going on? Like, they don't listen to you. They're like, I'll do what wait, no, you can't just keep doing whatever you want. I mean, I was this for a little bit. That was not for ever. And I realized that my fear of being unliked was causing me to let students get away with so much stuff that no learning was happening. And so my desire to be effective took over that next semester. And I'm like, hey, maybe y'all heard last semester this class was just a little pushover. That guy's gone. You could thank the class last year for they chased him away. That guy don't exist no more, And so the desire to be effective probably came out more in this, loud, strict person because I was like, I cannot let that happen again. And so, and when you're doing teaching like that, where you're watching all the little pieces, it's exhausting, right? If I was able to let some things go, I probably wouldn't be so tired. But anyway, that's the teacher mask. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you said, especially the phases in teaching, that early phase, and then you kind of just figuring it all out. I still remember, I think in my first year, a student asked me if he could go to the bathroom, and I sort of felt like, of course, but then I realized, oh, hang on, I'm in control of all these kids. Like, it was so obvious, but it just also seemed so obvious that, of course, you can go to the bathroom. Like, it didn't seem like a thing. I was like, oh, hang on, I'm actually, playing this role, and there's that, that overarching sense of responsibility mirrored with that desire to be liked. And there's kind of a growth that we go through. There's probably, I guess a milestone that we reach maybe 5 years in where we kind of get a little bit more stability around that. Because, I mean, it's such a great question, the mask with the teacher persona, because the teacher persona, we've both done lots of different jobs in our lives, but I think the teacher persona is like so key to teaching, right?
Yeah.
Like how you are with kids, because they're all just sitting there hour after hour, day after day. They're just figuring people out. They're listening a little bit to what we're saying, but they're looking, oh yeah, big day today, is it? Or how are you doing? So, they run and they know exactly, and when we get to talk a bit about the burning issues, I think one of them is actually about this, is that the messenger matters, the teacher matters in the classroom.
Yeah.
And, within that, I have a friend who has a saying, which I quite like, which is, I make the weather. And, teachers, like they make the weather in those classrooms. And it's interesting when you look at the research around, teacher performance, like normally there's a really steep up curve in that first 5 years of growing, and then it flattens out. And that's not only in the teaching profession, it's in the medical profession. There's lots of different professions. And so I think what people generally think is that, we've built the heuristics and the processes and everything. We kind of say, now we can do it. Let's just kind of, I'm here now. I can kind of just make it happen. Or it might be like I'm surviving. I'm tired. I'm doing the best I can. That's all I got. I can't keep growing because it's hard. It's so hard. It's so humbling being a teacher. Like, they point stuff out, you got a pimple on your face, or you got it's like, oh my God. It's so hard to be a teacher, so hard. And then we have districts and administrators who don't necessarily always trust the experience of the teachers who are showing up and going, hey, this is what the kids are actually showing us. This is what we're dealing with and what we're working with. So, I resonated a lot with what you said, for sure.
And definitely, just what you said, and I'll let you share your mask. The idea of teachers who've been teaching before cell phones were in everybody's pocket, and now, because the world, I mean, it almost seems like you're in a different planet, right? It's definitely depending on what the rules of your school are, and rules are nebulous based on how the kids respond to those rules or allow themselves to be led by those rules, right? But that's a whole another world in itself.
Yeah. And what their relationship to rules is, like, do they see rules as being restrictive, or do they see rules as being enabling? Oof. Well, the other thing I've been thinking about, in creating equity in a classroom, that we understand that we respect the rules because it enables other people to participate and for us to hear other voices.
Yeah.
But also the other thing I've been thinking a lot about in the last few days has just been about the whole idea of, self-discipline as an act of self-love. That actually if I can do this, and we don't ever really teach something like that. We often teach about goals and look out and here's a story about goals and, climb every mountain and, you can do it. And you think the right thoughts, you feel good and then you'll go out, that'll propel you forward. Yeah. But sometimes, you just got to go forward. Yeah. And then you'll feel better. And then you'll start having great thoughts. Sometimes the opposite is true. But within that, the other bit that I was talking to a colleague just yesterday about this, like, so that's an act of self-love, because actually sometimes just getting up, just getting to school, like, that's all I got today. That's it. That's all I've got. And that's an act of self-love. And how as teachers do we recognize that in the classrooms? That people, hey, you showed up today. And that's awesome. Let's start with that. Let's honor that. Let's just take a moment because you're here. Kids are coming into the classroom. Good morning. How are you today? It's great to see you. Thank you. Thank you for being here before we start the lesson. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got this time together. Let's just go quiet for a moment because learning is hard. We acknowledge that. We're all at different places, but let's just take a moment before we jump in and just, right. Okay. So how is everyone today? Like, let's start with that. Every kid I talk to, like, they always say, what do the teachers don't get? What do we don't get? I'm like, we've got lives, like, yeah. We've got stuff happening. Like, you're so busy, standardized testing and, science of learning and cognitive load theory and, like, all this stuff. But it's like human beings here right now, So that's another piece.
Powerful. Well, I'm gonna let you share your mask, and then we'll jump in some of the other topics that we discussed talking about.
Yeah. So for me, I think that, the outward bit, particularly early, was that I thought it was engaging, passionate, and fun. Like, they were the three early doors ones. I started off. I was teaching, English and, theater and stuff. And I just thought that the best way for me to help these kids was to be entertaining and create amazing lessons and keep moving. And, I had never slept in the day before I taught. I'd done all sorts of jobs. Like, I'd labored, I'd worked in kitchens, scrubbing dishes. I'd done, shifts like that, all sorts of stuff I'd done, cleaning stuff, like anything, you name it, I did it growing up. But then teaching, I would get home 5 or 6 o'clock. I would sleep for an hour, like, solid. And then, I'd do my lesson prep and marking and whatever. And that was like in year one. I thought, this isn't sustainable. Like, clearly, like, you can't be the funniest guy and the most entertaining guy, like, every minute of the day. You're really gonna run yourself into the ground. Fortunately, Ashanti, that was about 30 years ago, and I'm still here. So obviously something changed. And what then changed in terms of the outward bit was I figured out that, I started looking at, well, what are some other things that are really important? And I realized it was really, really important that the kids felt safe. And it's like, okay, so then actually trying to be funny and being, unpredictable and trying to create all this wowee stuff, actually didn't help kids feel safe. So then it was much more about being, being more even, being more fair, enforcing fair rules and understanding, there's the Freire, book on, the the pedagogy of the oppressed, and thinking about, okay, so moving from power over to power with. And
Yeah.
then more recently, I've been thinking about, well, what about power to? Like, how do we enable kids? So it's not just, it is democratized, but it's not only democratized. Actually, sometimes we can't ignore that there are hierarchies, and sometimes we need them
Yeah.
just to, get stuff done. So what does it look like when we let a child shine in the, in the driver's seat, so the power to piece. And so moving more to that, and probably the third, external word was just about being calm. Because I really think, like going back to the comment about, I make the weather in the classroom. I can be emotional. I can be melancholic. May surprise you. I'm
Yeah.
an arty guy. I read books, and I get emotional in movies, and I can be moody. And actually, I got to manage my emotional wake, because I'm sort of like pulling the class along, and that, if I'm pushing too hard, there's big waves are going behind me, and I need to just make sure that actually, as I'm moving through the ocean with these kids, I need to be calm. And I get the old saying of, a calm sea never made for a skilled sailor, and I get that, but like, we are holding the space for these kids. It's the greatest privilege, isn't it, to be able to just, sit with it, to be someone along the journey, at this such a formative time. So that's been a big part, probably, of the latter part of, up to now, of me,
Yeah.
is trying to find ways. And if I was a teacher listening to this, I'd be like, great, yeah, sure, but what do I do? Or, what do I think about? Well, it's stuff like, mindfulness practices. It's stuff like, am I sleeping? What am I eating? Am I drinking at night every night of the week? Not to excess, but does that affect my sleep? Or, do I do something for myself? We were joking about, the swimming, but like, that's something that I do for myself, because
Yeah.
I feel like the old saying, you win the morning, you win the day. And, I set myself up for a day, because then I know I can be more calm, and I take responsibility for it. So, like, there's a degree in which, the institutions that I work for are responsible for my well-being, but there's actually, I'm responsible for my well-being.
Yeah.
And, I need to own that, and, to show up with that. So there's some of the things that I do. I mean, I don't know if they resonate with you, or people that are listening, but it hasn't always been an easy thing, but it's something that I've just, again, going back to the thing we're chatting about, like the comment I made about, the self-discipline as an act of self-love. I mean, that's an example. You do 10 minutes of mindfulness every day before you start your lessons. That's a self-discipline. But I know I show up better, and then miraculously, if I'm making the weather, the kids are they're just not as edgy, because they're like, oh, and if they are, I'm not as edgy. I don't have to, I don't have to go to 10, like, or 11 to they're at 10, I've got to go to 11, they're 11, I've got to go to 12, like, I don't have to, I've got more bandwidth.
Yeah. When you said the quote about uh, win the morning, win the day, like that part of, like, as you go into the class and as you have, like, you're coming in, it's like, okay, I'm about to set the climate for this space. We're going to, like, hear the things that are going to be, that they can kind of expect after they get the hang of it. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's also that part that feels really powerful where, some days you look out the window and you say, oh, it's cloudy. I guess I got to get a jacket in. And you go in and all of a sudden the clouds are burned off and now it's like 80 degrees. And you're like, what the heck? I'm like burning up, right? And sometimes even the opportunity for the shift that happens in us, like as educators, to say, oh, okay, this is what I was feeling. And then as the day went on, oh, this kid came in and said something really positive that kind of gave me a spark, right? Maybe I was dragging. Maybe, yeah, as much as I'm supposed to be setting the climate in the room, like, I'm human too. So
Yeah.
I my energy is off a little bit, or I'm tired. I'm just tired, or
Yeah.
I didn't get my coffee, my juice, my whatever my morning spark is, and then I'm just like, I feel like I'm dragging. And then the kid comes in and says, "Hey, look at you!" And then they do something. They say whatever. They make a joke at you. They do whatever, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm ready now. I'm ready." And then they get you. Then you're in it, right? You're on fire, right? And I think that goes to the conversation that we were going to talk about around culture, climate, and belonging, right? I think it's like when you walk into that space, as you create the climate in the room, it is not devoid of the fact that there are elements coming in that are trying to change that back or pull it off course, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I think like some kids come in and make fun of your shoes. They're doing it in a joking way. Some come in and making fun of your shoes. They're actually really being mean, right? I mean, and we're adults, right? We're not supposed to worry about a teenager being mean, but I can be honest for myself that I've had some students point out things that I felt really self-conscious about, like, wow, like, and I felt that feeling like, okay, don't take it personal. It's only a teenager. You're not in danger. You're not in middle school anymore. And you have to like, oh, okay. There's a real feeling in there still about this stuff that maybe I should be over by now. Right. And I think making sure that as educators we do that. So what is your, like, I'd love to just jump in, like, for you, culture, climate, belonging, what are some things you do, or what are some things that you have seen done, or how does that show up in your class or in your spaces that you lead?
Well, I think it's just a couple of things. So one, I think, whether it's at a teacher level or a, administrator level, I think actually having belonging and culture and climate on your agenda, on your leadership agenda, like one of the things I think is it's difficult to tell other people how to set the culture and climate and belonging for their own school, because like I'm not from that school. Like so much of it is embedded in the social ecology of the place. But what we don't often do is we have enablers. So, the enablers that you and your listeners will be very familiar with, things like, using student voice and, talking about power with and, power to, and we've talked a little bit at touching in on things like, what does the entry routine for your class look like? What are the other routines in your class? Do you have, do you use like a dialogic circle in your class to debrief? Do you have an expectation that within your classroom that you probably got, say if you had 100 units, you're probably going to burn up, I don't know, anywhere depending on what time of day, what the kids are, you're going to burn up 40 or 50 units just doing the gardening of the environment of the classroom. Like, hey, can you sit down? Please, can you do that? Yes, yes, here's a pen you can borrow. Like all the, like we can't get too head up about that. But we have to also remember that the how we do that, the way of being when we do that, is saying to kids, oh, okay, so the expectation is that I bring a pen because it matters to Ashanti, it matters to Ray that I have a pen because he, she, I can see my teacher sees this as really important, and that's calling out like a level set of a hierarchy of values, because when to your example about when the kids make the jokes about the shoes and stuff, we've got the bandwidth. It's like, hey, like how do you kind of work with that? Like, is that an opportunity? Is that a window to sort of say, hey, that's it's a bit harsh, like just okay, because going back to the question of the mask, like the reality is that on the other side of the mask we do have our feelings, and we're sensitive and, we care. I don't know about you, and all the places I've worked, I mean, wow, teachers, they just love the kids, like they would do anything. And I think the kids can feel that, I really do think they can feel it, but they're going to test always, that's the nature of it. But anyway, so getting back to your question about belonging, I think having it as a, on leadership, wherever it is, whether it's at a class team level, whether it's with your own kids, what's our way of working? What's our code here for this class? Like, have we ever talked about it? One of the things I say, teaching theatre and drama and the like, is that when you do that training, you do a lot of training in creating an effective learning space, because in those kinds of classrooms, if you haven't got safety, if you haven't got trust, you can't even teach the first lesson. So, people are like, oh, drama games. Why are you doing drama games? Oh, that's all you do. You just play games all day. It's like, well, you probably do actually for a while. And the reason is because everyone's laughing and getting into it and everyone's fine. And then you present them with a monologue, which is really real, and they'll go there because they know that's okay. But how does that generalize back to a mathematics classroom where, if you're in primary school and, you've had relocations, or, you've come from, an environment where you haven't been able to get to school all the time and you've missed certain blocks and you can't progress, and the message that you have is that you're not good at maths. How do you create safety and value for those kids that are like, I don't belong here? It's like, well, in our code, you do belong here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll meet you where you are, and we actually talk about it in the classroom, and we praise not only the results and the outputs, but what those results and those outputs mean for you, in terms of the kinds of behaviors. I think there's other things that people can do, and I would call them things like, we talked about routines, which is really a form of a ritual, and there's more you can do in the ritualistic space at a broader level, for schools, about honor and acknowledging. And they're things that often we do, like graduation is a great example of one. But what does it mean, for us as we participate in this class? Like, I did this class and I got through this class. Do we actually honor and acknowledge the success? Is that built into a ritual, so that when we finish a unit of study, we sit in a circle and we talk about what were the big moments in the class. And it doesn't just have to be about, it was when, we all understood, Hamlet was crazy or something. It actually might be, I remember that time and we just all laughed so funny, and, because of this thing happened. And we just honor that, because that's actually tending to the soil of, the garden of the classroom, the behavioral stuff, the conditions, because we're dealing with kids that are just like, I don't fit here. I don't belong here. This is not for me. This is not what I can do. I know I'm smart enough, but every time I show up, I fail because I miss stuff. That wasn't my fault. And it's just like this big charge builds up. So it's this kind of balancing thing between, yes, the messenger matters and that we're ready to kind of facilitate that.
Yeah.
And I guess the other phrase just sort of has been sort of singing in my ears the last sort of week or so is just like a bit of an appeal to the soul of teaching. Like, what is the soul of a teacher? What is that? And how might we as teachers, this is what I love about what you're doing in this series, is like, we're bringing teachers together about sharing about what we love. We don't all have the answers, but I think we're united in this feeling, this soul feeling. It's hard to articulate exactly what it is, but I think it can be enabled through, changing the agenda, using routines and dialogic structures to support, that, and honoring and acknowledging, the various kids that we have. So there's a bunch of, it's a bit all over the shop, I apologize, but there's a bunch of thoughts around, things that we can do, to help build that sense of belonging within a classroom.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's actually exactly the work that we're talking about, because if we don't, I think you said the school you're at right now, you have, there's a feeling around campus that teachers love the work they're doing. Right. And if you've ever been in a place, even if you just went as a visit where it wasn't that case, you can feel like you're in a box.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world is happening? Right. And that energy, whether people believe in the energy fields or not, like you walk into a classroom where there's some kind of disconnect between the teacher and the students. You can almost feel it. You can almost cut it in the air. You can almost like see the weather. You're like, whoa, is there a cloud? Did I just walk into a cloud or a hurricane, a tornado? Did I just walk into a storm? What's happening? Right. And I think, having as a former administrator, when I was an administrator and I had to do teacher observations, sometimes you do planned and sometimes you do impromptu, and you walk in and you're like, oh boy, this is a very different show than when I had a plan, right? Because then when they're planned, you gotta the teacher is preparing, right? When you're doing the drive-bys or the walk-bys, it's like, is everybody? You like I had a kid. Like, is everything okay in here? Everybody okay? Because something seems. And the kid doesn't want to like telling the teachers, and they're like, yeah, it's just like that right now. They're just like, he's just like, oh, okay, it's one of them days, right? So you're trying to figure out who is it coming from? Is it coming from the teacher end? Is it coming from the student end? You're just like trying to just, okay, I better get my my note taking skills out because what am I witnessing, right? And I think that's so powerful in the education world is that, for people who don't know, and I think maybe this next part as we jump in, as we, think about these beautiful devices that we hold in these supercomputers that we have in our pockets, right? I'm eventually start calling it a phone. I'm gonna start calling it a supercomputer in our pockets, right?
Yeah.
What is your school's current rules about the supercomputers? For those who don't know what I'm talking about a phone. I'm talking about a phone. It is a phone. We call it a phone, but there's so much more. So that's why I'm just making a joke about the supercomputer. But what is your school's rule about those devices?
So the rule is that there's no phones sort of all the way from elementary and middle school.
Okay.
And the upper school, they're allowed to have the phone, but they have to go at every time they go into a classroom. There's a phone box at the front, so they have to drop it in. But we're in the midst of really trying to walk that back even further because I notice as well in the in the United States, like a lot of districts are banning phones, and across Australia the same. And I get the argument is, oh well, you ban them, they just go straight under the desks. And I get that, but I also think that there's still an argument about the reality that your Surgeon General Vivek Murthy I don't know if you saw this, but a couple of months ago now he was saying there needs to be like warnings like on cigarette packets for social media. So and it's because the thing I reckon about a rule like that and Vivek saying what he says is even in Australia you go, oh okay, someone has really thought about this and they can see that it's really not a good thing, and it just gives us something to kind of, okay, yeah, they might still be under the desk, and yeah, I get, it's hard, and but at the end of the day, like, we're in a social experiment, and what are we seeing? We're seeing attention fragmentation where kids can't read anymore, and so I was in a class, just a very quick anecdote, like a upper school class, they were studying, I think still a great book from the 20th century, Animal Farm, about the way in which we work together. And it's not a hard read. It's not a long read. But talking to some kids and like, hey, have you read this book? Like, they're mid studying it. Like, they should have read it. Should have even the scramble. They should have read it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, have you read it? And like, have you read it? And like, I'm like, just tell me. Have you read it? And you're like, well, I've listened to it on audiobook. I'm like, okay, well, that's a start, And I'm like, do you find it? Like, I'm thinking I'm conscious. I don't want to, I don't, I've gone into this class as a sub, really. And, I'm just conscious that I don't know, maybe this neurodivergent, there was a dyslexia. I don't know if there was something around his reading. I didn't know, so I wasn't going to push. I was just curious. Is that a new thing or is that something you've always been working with? He goes, oh, no, I used to be able to read. It's fine.
Yeah.
I could concentrate. And I was like, oh. And meanwhile, the kid next to him is like sort of piped up because it's far more interesting conversation than the work that I'm meant to be doing. Oh, yeah. So he's like, kind of in and like, yeah, me too. He's sort of chiming in. And then I was like, okay, so was there ever a time it was okay? He's like, yeah, I used to be able to read. I was like, okay, when was that? He goes, I reckon when I was in, elementary school.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you think happened? And he seriously just goes, he's like, pause. And he just goes, oh, my phone? And it's just this moment. And then I walked out of that class thinking, wow, we are faced with a generation of kids who are not going to read really important texts for long enough to go deep enough into ideas. And, we've got kids who can't read social cues because they're online, and we don't, everything's flattened out. So we don't have three dimensions. In real life, a pause is a good thing. Online, a pause is like, hey, you still got me? You're still there? Like, it's like if we lost a connection, but for kids, this is how they're growing up. They don't see it like that. And, again, I was in the paper in Australia today, it might have been the paper in the States as well, because Australia's pushing hard on social media now, instead of saying, look, we think you have to be, 16 or 18 because of what's happening. And we know what's happening is, increased loneliness, social isolation, like all sorts of terrible things are happening, and it's correlated with, social media use. And, the CEO of Snap, Ewan Spiegel, came out saying, hey, what are you talking about? You just turn it off. Parents have already got the tools. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a teacher. That's just not going to work. Like, yeah, because you know what? How much are you online? How much are you looking? I can't manage I'm in my 50s. I can't manage. Like, I'm I'm scrolling through the footy, and I'm scrolling looking at, like, Gary Clark Jr. videos, and like I'm just I'm doing it. I'm just on there forever.
Oh,
How are these kids going to do it with their brains? Impossible.
yeah.
It's a massive worry. And then we throw AI onto that, and you go, okay, so, well, we got to live with that, and there's some value in it, certainly in terms of productivity, but yeah, do we know what we're doing really? Who's driving the ship on this one?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
Anyway, there's a few there for you.
We gave somebody without their license an opportunity to drive it, huh?
Yeah,
Because it's definitely like a catch. Like, am I caught up to what is happening? Like, do I know the language? Do I know what you just asked me? What you just asked me?
yeah.
You asked me something about some whatever words they're using, right? I'm like, I have no idea what you just said, right? Is that a good question? Is it a bad question? Is it naughty? Is it just being silly? Like, how do am I offended? Like, what, I don't know what you said, so I don't know how to respond, And that's
Yeah.
also like, oh, okay, we're talking to each other, but we don't know what each other is saying because we're in this new world of what words mean and what their values are, right? Like, like that part, right? And then if we're not careful as educators, we don't know what the words mean. So we're hearing kids say it to other kids, and we're like, oh, that's not one of the words that I think is a harmful word, because we haven't kept up with some educators haven't kept up with the language and the times, and right. So stuff has been happening in your own classroom, and you're like, wait, how did that start in my classroom? I didn't see any of that, but you realize, oh, you just didn't know. You didn't know what that meant. So somebody called it out across the room. You thought it was just some kind of like funny word because everyone laughed, but you didn't know that that was an attack or a harmful word, right? Like, so who is in charge, right? I mean, how much are the adults still holding the position of being in charge, but not consulting with the young people to learn enough to be like, oh, actually, you don't even know what's going on. You don't even know what's happening. Like,
Mm.
how don't you know what's going on? And then you're like, well, tell me, because obviously I'm too old to be knowing I missed it. So help me out, And then you may have to have students who got you who actually give you the intel, because then you're like, oh, I missed it. Oh, I didn't notice that. I didn't see that. I didn't hear that. I didn't realize that. And then, so all those ways that we get to build those relationships and then keep like holding space for each other, right? Like, I think I've had plenty of students over in the years I was teaching to help me get me on track of what was happening at lunchtime out there, because I'm in my classroom at lunchtime, I'm like, oh wait, what happened today? Oh goodness, right? And then you have to like get your intel from those who are running the show, right? It's kind of like if they decided they were all walking out what the adults going to do. We're going to hook arms and hold them. No. They're walking out, right? So it's important for us to have students who are willing to, who trust us enough to come and tell us how to respond to, or here's what's going on. You should know that this is happening. I don't say I didn't tell you nothing, right? But I think that's so important in the conversations too, for educators, for teachers, for higher education, for all levels of education, that we build those collaborative spaces where we could talk. And I think that's so important,
Yeah, totally agree. And, I think you've just illustrated what we were talking about earlier about, we live in a cultural world where there's so much sort of network, we're interested in connecting, and we connect, and the cultural phenomenons that we're seeing, lots of kind of institutionalized things, whether it's gender, like lots of ideologies are being deconstructed and re-put together in a network. It's like, well, you can do this, and we see lots of contentious issues, and then they become politicized, so they get split. And there's a great American philosopher who's at Harvard, and I just forgot the name, but he makes this point about it. As that happens, that splitting happens, and again, if you look at the research evidence, boys are becoming more conservative and girls are becoming more liberal from 18 to 24. There's a huge gap now opening up. It literally looks like that, not only in the United States, in Korea, in other countries around the world. And the point is that I think we're losing the common good, because we can't talk about it anymore. We can't talk about, and so when you were talking, and I was thinking about what you were saying, and yeah, you're absolutely right. You need the network, but you also need to understand and accept, I think, that there are hierarchies. You were saying about there are kids that are kind of socially activated, and they're the influencers, like they're the ones that people go to for help, or they get advice from, or they're the ones that are kind of held up. Human beings, we just seem to kind of create these hierarchies that we can't ignore them. I think we ignore them at our peril. We're better off using the network to understand the hierarchy, and then bring that into a new conversation, and then to use, this is the power with power to bit. It's like, okay, so, well, what are the values that drive that hierarchy? Because when they go, when it's when it's the hidden lives of learners, it's hard to kind of understand and penetrate that. But if we ignore it, it's at our peril, because, we will not have that central good. And I think, and this is another risk with AI, is it's there's a lovely, I think, a fantastic Australian music artist called Nick Cave. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's one of our biggest kind of well-known performers, but he has a thing called the Red Hand Files, and he talks about different things. Anyway, one of the things he's talking about is AI, and he says, maybe the horror of AI is that it will always be in its infancy, because it's kind of mining stuff that's out there. But like, if we get a clear picture of reality, what's on the net is actually not that great.
Yeah.
So there's some great stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's like a normal distribution curve. There's some really good stuff, and there's like a lot of just stuff, and then there's some really bad stuff. But, if we're just using machines and machine learning and, large language models just to kind of do all that, where does the creativity come in? Where does that, the coming back to the soul of, appeal to the soul of teaching, like those genuine moments. And then as teachers, one of the other big things I think is, I guess preparing people for this new world, because what are the uniquely human attributes that aren't going to go away, that we can facilitate, the things that are going to always be, I think always a deep truth about just being a human being, and it's belonging, it's, relationships, they're the things that, we would think that we'll never have that, be able to replicate. So how do we where's that in the hierarchy of values? Well, as it's not standardized, you don't pick it up in standardized testing. Yep. It's not what we spend a lot of our time talking about. It's not embedded in sort of the idea of the school as the center of community where people belong and they'll always know that they came from a good place. And they can always go back there. I mean, what a gift. You know what I mean? Like, that's what schools can be to kids. But we're not really talking about some of that stuff, and I guess the final point I would make is, just you were saying about, in the classrooms and, when you're looking at, the evaluations and you're doing the sort of the walkthrough or the plan visits, there's a really good book again, another American, Stanley McChrystal, and he wrote a book about team of teams. And anyway, look, he was a military person. I'm not saying that generalizes onto schools, and I appreciate that's problematic. It then went into business and blah blah blah. But the point I think that's interesting is he has this idea about, and it kind of to me speaks to that idea of network and hierarchy. And it's like, well, actually, you in your classroom, you can make a huge difference to the school. I think we standardize. We think, oh, we've got to have everything lined up, and then we'll all do it the same way, and then we'll test everyone the same way, and they'll all wear the same clothes, and we'll all. And that's and you know what? That does work. It can work, but something else can work, and that is, you go to a cracking classroom with a really good teacher, and everyone wants to get into that class, and then you start spreading that to another class, and then you got 2 of these things, and then you got 3, and then 4, and then they're starting to build a community of practice, and then some of the people that are feeling so tired, they're not carrying the whole load anymore because they think, oh, in my classroom, I'm the only one that cares now. And it's like, no, we've got this community of practice, because the messenger matters, the teachers matter.
Yeah, man. I think in the idea of learning as we go, I probably, as we're in like this new season, I probably thought, oh, you know what? These conversations are an hour is enough. And I realized as we're talking, I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. I don't know. I mean, not that. Oh my goodness. I'm excited. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for being back in this conversation, in these real deep new conversations about education. And not only am I glad that we got you in here for this second season, but I'm glad that you're in this work, and I can hear the passion in your voice, and I'm excited to continue learning and being a part of this connection. And I hope that when I get out to Melbourne, we're gonna have a face to face while I watch you swim and I stand there and I don't know. I'm just making no promises yet, but I want to thank you. I'm excited. I think this year for the mask is the movement it's our movement this year. And you're right. It may not work in every school, but we're here to say, but if your school is doing nothing, in place of nothing, do this little bit of something, right? And how do we make sure that we're asking the people who are in charge, who make all of those big decisions, to not ignore what you can't see? And it means that you have to ask. And the only way you're going to get to students to tell you is by just being willing to ask, right? Start by asking, and then also be willing to be in a conversation, So that's what I was excited about this year. So I'm excited, and I hope that maybe this is just as we figure out how this new season of educators conversation with talking with teachers is going to work, as we're processing it, as we doing it, you and I doing it, we're okay. How do we make sure that we don't feel like we're rushing, but knowing that teachers are busy, and how do we not take up too much of their time? And how do we, all these things that we have to think out now is like, as I looked at the clock, I'm like, oh my God, we went over, and I want to respect your time. I want you to know that I appreciate you for being here. And I'm excited for this next chapter of this work together. So is there any the last thing you want to say to folks as we close this momentary chapter, as we kind of move forward?
I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today, and just to acknowledge, the work that you're doing. You're a teacher, and you're a great example, I think, of someone who really gets the soul of teaching. You're innovating. You're trying new things. It's all that stuff that took us to teaching in the first place. How can I make a difference? Like, how do I help? Support and care and educate, and that's the work you're doing. So it's really my great privilege to be able to speak with you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, would you let folks know about, just tell them the name of the conference, and then what we'll do is we'll link it. But if you can say one sentence about the conference, just so we can make sure we let folks know, and hopefully we get folks coming down. I think it's in Northridge, if I think right?
So it's at Fullerton.
Fullerton, excuse me.
And that's okay. So Fullerton, I think it's on the 8th of November, 2024, and it's just called Positive Masculinity. If you want to check out positivemasculinity.org.au, all the details are there. And yeah, I'd love to see people. It's for educators, but also people working in health. We've got a whole bunch of different speakers from a couple of Aussies coming over, and a whole bunch of people from the States as well. Judy Chu, Matt Engel Carlson, and all sorts of interesting people. So it's going to be really cool.
It's going to be, oh my gosh. Well, listen, folks, we were going to link to that in the notes, and we'll be sharing it out as it gets closer. And whatever ways we can share it on our platforms, let us know. Cause I definitely think we definitely need some more spaces for young men to hear that they are positive and to feel the positive energy around their work, themselves, and know that no matter what chaos is happening in the world, that it's individual choices that add up to all these things. They're not stuck. They're not stuck, So I'm excited for the work you all are doing. And if I can be there, I will. If not, we'll send somebody from our team. So you'll get to meet somebody out there making masks with people at Fullerton.
Really that'd be great.
Ray Swann, again, thank you for being a part of the Taking Off the Mask podcast. Folks, this is Talking with Teachers. We know that you may not be a teacher in the classroom, but hopefully in the people in your circles and your community, that you get to be a person who listens. And then you ask questions, and then you listen and ask questions, and then you share. And I think that is teaching happening in all the most unique and out of classroom ways. So whether you're a teacher in a class or whether you're just a person who cares, keep asking questions, keep listening. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. And we'll see you all real soon. Taking Off the Mask podcast, season number, I guess we're calling it season 2. We haven't thought about that, but Talking with Teachers. Ray Swann, it's so good to see you, brother.